My name is Ramirez. You can call me Frog Bear, or you can call me Rami. This is going to be one of the hardest episodes ever. Okay, let's just start off with the first video. Let's see if I have it up. Let me mute myself.
Nazi Germany had a plan to sexualize America's children. And Nazi German scientists started working with Alfred Kinsey in the US, the Kinsey Institute.
The great sex researcher of the 1950s. Right?
Absolutely. And this is a man who performed sexual acts on 6-week-old babies, boys, and then wrote that every child wants to be sexual. And he interviewed pedophiles and asked pedophiles, what do you think a child wants? It's a completely flawed work, but we have built America's sexual foundation. Every book, every viewer read when they grew up was based off of Kinsey's work, all our curriculums. Hugh Hefner was a subject of Alfred Kinsey.
I didn't know.
Kinsey met Hefner at a college campus, and Hefner was still a virgin at the time, and he groomed Hefner and he said, look, through publication and pornography, we can desensitize the American male. It is a planned, systemic, and systematic attack on God's purpose for sexuality.
Well, this was the video that I found yesterday. And I've heard that name before. I've heard of Kinsley's name before. I actually bought a book forever ago that ended up in my possession the same time I found a couple other books. It's called The Kinsley's Corruption, an expose on the most influential scientist of our time. Now, I'm just going to play another clip, just because, honestly, this is a very difficult subject for me to talk about.
America was educated by a pedophile whose work was labeled as science. Just as Darwin was the father of legitimizing evolution, Kinsey was the father of legitimizing the sexual revolution and all that's based upon that today.
Sure enough, Hefner was true to his word.
So, what do you guys think? I look at this from a perspective of connecting the timeline. I wasn't expecting this to be added to my research. I never actually read that book. It took me a while to find it today. But I was not expecting this. And it gets much worse. Like, if you want me to continue this, I got you. Like,
known as the Kinsey Reports. The world recognized him as the leading scientific expert on human sexuality. The reports claim that humans were sexual from birth, and that what we deemed as immoral sexual behavior was actually normal, thus making it moral. Once a biologist who studied gall wasp, Kinsey's obsession with sexuality led him to found the Kinsey Institute for Sex Research at Indiana State University. What people to this day are not aware of were the methods he used to collect his data.
And I looked at the graphs that he provided, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 tables. And I said, wait a minute, that's a 2-month-old baby. How does he know a 2-month-old baby did or did not have an orgasm? And then table 34, a 4-year-old child, 26 orgasms in 24 hours. That's an around-the-clock experiment.
Wow, that's torture.
That's torture, you bet.
okay, I realize now that I was muted. Nobody wants to quantify this. Nobody wants to quantify where this all started, where this was all hidden, how all of this was approved. And all of this was used as a Cold War excuse. Oh, we need to experiment on human people because of the Cold War. Excuse me? Kinsey wasn't allowed for all of his research until 1947 and on. The only reason why I'm showing the Atomic Energy Commission Board is because this was the mechanism and the excuse used to approve all of these human experiments. Kinsey was heavily in communications with a Nazi scientist who was conducting his own research on camps in Germany. America is stuck in a very interesting place with its Stockholm syndrome, because there is this new class of young individuals who worship, absolutely worship Nazis, absolutely worship Hitler, without really quantifying that they're just still stuck in a Stockholm syndrome effect that all started with human experimentations in the early, or you want to say the late 40s. I don't know, I'm completely altered. My whole day has been completely fucked because yesterday I discovered the video that I initially showed in the beginning, and now I'm stuck here trying to quantify all of this material. The fact that this was systematic, this was completely, right? Because I proved Reuben Ernest, who had a lot of his research proved in 1930. And then by 1933, he was the head of or at least he had a position of authority at the Tavistock Institute in the UK. Now it makes a lot more sense why the British government doesn't want any more investigations in relation to Nazi scientists, because this is what it uncovers. This is what it starts to prove. And yet, I don't know. I'm just fucking flabbergasted. I'm thoroughly, I don't know. I'm pissed. I'm not very happy with me discovering all this. I'm not very happy with the fact that now I have to quantify the effects of this throughout history. And it's kind of interesting because if you look at what Kinsey was largely used for, it was largely used for pharmaceutical purposes. Birth control, the morning after pill. And all of these human experimentations were not just kids, were not just babies. It was all the way up to adolescence. And now we have to, well, reverse engineering this is going to be very difficult, because look at our market, look at our culture, look at what we have offered to us. It makes me kind of sick. This is not, the reason why this really affects me is because, like, my dad was abused. And because my dad was abused, he abused of his kids. Right? Because I'm not the only family he has. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, like, wow, all of this was not just used for the pharmaceutical industry purposes, but it was also used for Hugh Hefner to create Playboy, to create this new industry. Because the way I look at it now, with the dating market, with dating apps, with how our culture operates, it's very, very telling what the agenda was. The agenda was not just to sexualize people, was to open up all of America to this industry. And now more than ever, women are treated as women are now the biggest commodity market there is. Look at the dating scene, look at OnlyFans, look at pornography. This was deliberate. And now I have to deal with the fact that I know a bunch of people who worship all of these Nazis, and it's just like, wow, you guys are the absolute, like, you are stuck in a Stockholm syndrome. They destroyed your country, they destroyed your people, they abused of you, they experimented on you, and yet people still want to quantify that science never did anything wrong. People still want to quantify that the Nazis didn't do anything wrong. It gets much worse when you look at somebody like Filsby, who essentially allowed rogue Soviet agents into America under the guise of freedom fighting. And by the way, Filsby was a double agent. He was already working for the Soviet Union, and he had a very high-ranking position in the UK government. This was deliberate. In my opinion, this was so deliberate, they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what kind of counterculture that they were creating. And they, not only that, but they employed the best scientists, the best minds in order to create this new systematic science that would deliberately steer our culture, our history, and the very future of this country. I'm just in shock that nobody's actually made any meaningful attempt to connect all of these dots. No, I guess I just have to... I'll see if I can make another video about a different topic. I'm just gonna leave this here, because I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan of having to talk about this. You know what I mean? Definitely don't want to be the face of it. But here I am, having to connect the dots with MK Ultra, scientific research, foundation money that deliberately looked for the best minds of certain things in order to create this new science, in order to, right? Because you have to understand the very nature of a report, right? All of these foundations would always ask for a report. They would always, it's not like they funded this out of the goodness of their heart. Because at the end of the day, there is a detailed report of what is discovered during these conventions, during these interactions between these great minds. Somebody has to read that report. Somebody has to, and the very nature of somebody reading that report means that this person is an analyst to a degree that he could look at the report, look at the science, and be adequate enough to understand what the research is saying. The implementation of this, obviously, was handled very differently by different people, because it wasn't up until Project Paperclip that we got these new scientists where the research finally decided to just kick it into third, fourth gear, right? It didn't go from 0 to 100 within a few months. No, it took them a while to deliberately set up these systems, to deliberately set up these these research facilities, and they did it all. It, to me, in my opinion, it doesn't stop at LSD. It doesn't stop at psychotropic drugs. They were hell-bent on figuring out human behavior, and they were intended, their entire intent was to build people from the ground up, to build their beliefs, to build them as a workhorse, and then to deliberately steer their expectations. I don't know how else to say this. They achieved what they wanted. Not only did they steer culture the way they wanted, they created the exact drones that they wanted. And now we have a bunch of people who are hell-bent on defending the medical institution. They're hell-bent on protecting all of these corporations under the guise of liberalism, under the guise of BLM, under the guise of, we care about people, we care about the little guy, when in reality, they're just using it as a mask to mask the fact that they were all involved in this. I don't know. Either way, my name's Ramirez.